Hey guys, welcome back to the Tukes and Tires YouTube channel. As always, I'm Zach, and this week we're working on the C1 Chevelle when we're making up this crazy contraption to bend up these custom drive shaft loops and to get them welded in to stiffen up the floor. And we make up this custom shifter linkage with heim joints and 3/8 rod, so let's get after it.
Hey, is that Timmy's?
Yeah, because we're in Canada. So where I think we're going to start this video is we're going to try to finish up the tubes inside the cockpit on this car. If you haven't watched the last video where we made up all the, basically the majority of the floor supports and the seat brackets, definitely go give that a watch. And there's also a playlist on this whole entire car so you can see the progress of what we've done so far on our journey of trying to make a street legal stock car. So far it's been pretty fun. And it's been awesome being able to create whatever I want to create. But we'll get you guys to look in here to kind of see where we're going to start at. So we need to make up some hoops that are going to go over top of the drive shaft, basically to protect us, just in case that ever decides to blow up, and just to hold some sheet steel so we're protected from the elements. So we're going to do three, basically one in the back there where those like temporary supports are, one in the front, kind of where this bends, and then one in the middle. But our tubing bender won't bend the radius that I want, and we've tried it so many different ways of trying to use our tubing bender to bend it, and every time it either just crushes it or it just doesn't look good. So as an example here, you can see we've bent this tube, and just, I don't know, it just doesn't look good. And we're going to be basically making this out of all scraps that we have around the shop to make up this bender. I have no idea if this is going to work, but, you know, we're going to give it a shot. It's going to be a trial and error thing. So this radius on this brake rotor will work out perfect basically for how spread apart those tubes are in the car. And, you know, this is just where my thought process is at. We'll probably be able to see it better once I have it created, but we'll just kind of walk you through it. So I have this old wheel bearing that actually came off my buddy Kenny's car, because we just did one on that, so it worked out pretty perfect actually. And you can see this spins pretty well. I don't know, it's going to work good for us. And then I got this, we're going to add probably a 3-foot bar, but this is just for, you know, showing you guys what it's going to look like. But if we hold this on this surface here, it butts perfectly into that wheel bearing. But what I'll end up doing is I'll make it go over top of it like that, but just cut in so we can weld it on both sides. That will give us a good swinging motion to hold us pretty center. And then if we put our, you know, mock-up tube here and we put a piece like that, you can see that it's going to butt in pretty good there. It'll overhang this. I'll probably give it just a little bit of room for, I don't know why, but just that's why my brain is thinking. We'll be able to weld it to that, something like that. We'll do a support here to hold the tube there. And then if we need to, just in case if it tries to bend this for some reason, I can do a tube down the center and across the top to this one. I have no idea if that's going to work. This is basically all scraps other than this one because I just bought this. But I'm going to get this welded together and then we'll see if it works. And then if it doesn't, you'll see why it doesn't work. So here we go. So I found that pipe that I was talking about, and you can see what kind of bend the bender that Dad made up could do. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, so this is what we were able to come up with the bender rig that I made up, and that thing is beautiful. I couldn't be happier with that, and it's pretty simple. It's just this little contraption here. We did end up breaking the door in the process because a piece of metal flew off when we were testing it out on the first one, and it ripped a chunk right out of the rotor right where I welded it. So we solved that with some bolts, and it's a two-person thing, so you'll see us because we're going to demonstrate on how to use this thing, but pretty much is you just put the tube in here, you can pull on this 3-foot handle, and you can work the pipe around. Dad has another pipe on the pipe we're actually bending to help push it around, and I pull on this one at the exact same time, just so we can slowly work the pipe around the rotor. This is all made out of scraps that we had around the shop, so it's nothing fancy, but it definitely does the job, and it's just a brake rotor with a wheel bearing and just some scrap pipes to make it into what it is, and we just have one welded on there so that it can be clamped into the vise. So we're going to set the tripod up and show you guys how this thing works, but I'm pretty happy with it so far. So this one, I don't know if we should try to get it further. I don't know where half the pipe is. You know what I mean? Because that's how much we had in that before, so you should technically slide this further down. I don't know what happened. Hold on. What's happening?
Well, don't forget, it's going to start bending here.
No, I know. Right? So we got about 8 inches. So from what this is you'd have to stick this past another 4 inches. So you'd have to keep coming.
Yeah, you think you're going to be good. You got to give me room for the pipe.
Sure. It's probably plenty high. Okay. You ready? Cat's in the way. You should get that cat out of there just so that she's not in the danger zone. Okay, you ready? Did you put grease on this thing?
Nope.
This one's bending really easy. Oh, I'm stuck on the weld.
I think we should...
You want to readjust?
Readjust.
Yep. Yeah, you clamp her down. It's twisting us for some reason here.
Huh?
I don't know. It's not flat, but I don't understand why. Maybe it's just the way to wait. This is better. You ready?
Okay.
Yep.
Move. Okay. Hold on.
Ready?
Okay. Okay, a little bit more.
Okay.
Want to measure that?
Or just check it on the other one. Just as long as they're this like the same shape, roughly.
So you gotta go a little more.
Okay. Ready?
Hold on. Wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're rough. Yep. Just for here, let's yeah, just throw tape on it just for, yeah, this one you're 8 3/4. That's this one. This one's 9, but this one could be further out. We could always give it a little tweak back too if I need to. We're in the ballpark. No, I mean later on. No, I'll have to do it in the vise. Here we have it. So there you have it, guys. That tube turned out pretty wicked. This one's not exactly the same as that one that we did, but we should be able to spread this out just a little bit if we have to. This curve should be pretty well exactly the same. It got squeezed just a little bit from going around it, so we can't do nothing about that, but I'd rather have it look nice like this than have it exactly the same. And all it's really doing is holding sheet metal on the floor. So we're gonna bend up the other one so that we have them all basically the same. And then we'll see about maybe trying to get these fit in the car and show you my thought process behind that. But this thing is looking pretty wicked. Dad's already ready to bend the other one. So we got all 3 of those hoops all bent up and they turned out pretty wicked. What we're gonna do now is see what we need to do to actually make them fit in the car. I obviously have no problem of cutting them and scribing them to the 2 pipes that are in here. But what I want to do is I want to see what clearances we need to actually make them fit and that the drive shaft will still clear if anything ever happens with the rear suspension in this car. So I'm going to bottom it out all the way, see how high the drive shaft comes up, and then we're going to make clearance from that. So to make this a little easier, I'm going to disconnect the rear shocks, and then I'm going to take some ratchet straps and try to hold the suspension down so that it's going to be, you know, like dog sitting in the back or whatever you want to call it. And then we can go from there to see what measurements we need to cut those hoops at to make it basically tapered up, so high in the back and smaller at the front. So I'm going to get this thing all jacked up and then measure from there, and then we'll start cutting and scribing these pipes. So let's get going, I guess. Huh, Lacey? You were sleeping, huh? Yeah. So we've got the car all squatted down in the back with some ratchet straps, basically as far as it could go. We are going to be doing rubber bump stops back there, so basically it would hit those before it would hit any kind of steel. But we're making it so that even if that wasn't there, that we'd still have a bunch of clearance. I got my first one all cut up. It's looking pretty sweet in there. I still have to fish mouth the pipes just a little bit, but that's no big deal. We're just going to do that with the grinder. But I'm going to climb in here to show you guys how I measured that and how we figured out for our clearance and everything, just so that you kind of get it 100% first time. But that's looking pretty sweet so far. But let me just get my butt in this car. It's kind of hard to do this all at one time. So hopefully you guys can see what's going on in here. It is a little cramped with the seats in here, and we'll probably have a cat cycling through here. So, you know, we just got to work around her. But how I started with this is I just found a straight edge that would fit in here. Mine is 2 inches wide, so it just works out really good for measurement wise. So what I did is I measured to the bottom of my straight edge on both sides and made sure that those measurements were exactly the same. I worked out for 4 5/8 to the bottom of it, and that I want 2 inches of clearance from the top of this pipe, or top of the drive shaft to the bottom of this pipe. It works out for 6 5/8. I did add 1/8 of an inch to my cut for fish mouthing, so it was actually 6 3/4 that we allowed from here to the bottom of this. We just marked both the same, and then I ended up just cutting them off. So that way, when we stick this over here, that from my straight edge, I have 1/8 of an inch to the top of it here. I'm just super paranoid because I don't want the drive shaft to hit. You know, technically we are bottomed out right now and it would never hit even if I was any closer, but this way we have super amount of clearance so that we don't have to worry about it. But we'll mark one up on the bench over there and I'll show you guys how I did that so that we made both exactly the same length, and then we'll get all of them cut out, fish mouth, and welded in here. So let's climb out of here now. So there's probably better ways of trying to figure out how to mark this onto this tube. This is just the way that I went about it, and it seemed to work out the best way. We're cutting the front one right now. The middle one's a little tricky because we need both the front and the back one in place to measure that one. So this one, we need to cut it at 5 3/4 inches long from the inside of this round. I'm going to cut it at 6 inches, so that way we leave a little bit at fish mouthing it. So we're just using the exact same square we were in the car. The inside of this 90, it starts off at 0, and then it goes to whatever measurement you need. So I'm just going to mark it here at 6 so that I can see where I need to mark it on this tube. And then I'm just going to lay it on the outside and then line it up here so that we can see that it works out exactly for the measurement we need. And I'm able to mark it over here on the tube. And then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we'll use this little tubing cutter to get the cut nice and straight, so that way it sits in there pretty well 90 in the car. But we'll get this cut up so that we can measure the center one, and then we'll go from there. So here we go. So we got those hoops all welded in there and they're looking pretty sweet. I know I didn't show doing the middle one. Basically, it just took a little bit of time once I got the front one and the back one welded in by taking a straight edge. So, taking a straight edge, going across the top, just making sure that it all lined up on all three sides, and it does. And I was also able to tie it in with the back cage, so now it's super sturdy because we are going to be doing a little tab right around here for the seat belts once we basically get the floor in. I'm going to do that afterwards because I think it's going to be a lot easier to see where those need to be laid out, but they turned out pretty sweet. And I also mocked up and welded in my e-brake handle that I bought. This is just a cheapy thing off of Amazon, but it's going to work. It's got a ratcheting function. You can put it back down. It's going to be nice and out of the way beside the seat, so that way we have a parking brake and that should all work. But now what I think we're going to do is we're going to go on to getting a shifter mocked up. And I actually had to drill and tap the holes in the tailstock on this transmission. It's a Vega 4-speed, so it didn't have any bolt holes because those cars had the shifter on the floor. Kind of a weird setup, but just how it is. So I spent some time drilling and tapping that out, but now it's all done, so we'll be able to make a bracket off of those 3 bolt locations. So we're going to be making up a custom setup here. Just because I'm not happy with like the kits that they sell online, and you can't find nothing for 4 speeds, and it's just bothering me. So we're gonna start with making a plate to actually get this shifter mounted. I do feel very terrible that I'm gonna hack this beautiful Mr. Gasket shifter off, but it's what I got. I'm probably going to do it like right around here and drill 2 holes into this and tap it. And then this is the shifter handle that we are going to have to use just to get it far enough back to the seat. So I'll end up just making a plate so that you can bolt this on here. And then the remaining portion of this Mr. Gasket handle, I will weld a piece of metal onto it and drill holes in it so that you can put it back onto the shifter, because I feel absolutely terrible. But I think the first plan of attack here is I want to make up a template, so I'm going to climb in there, make it for the 3 holes on the back of that tailstock, and then I can kind of bolt that cardboard to that, and then hold this shifter in place so that we can kind of see where it needs to go, and then I think we'll start from there. So I'm going to get in there and mock it up. Also remember, because we are going to be making custom linkage, put a pin in there so that you know where neutral is. But I'm going to get in here and make up this template, and I'll show you what I came up with once it's done. So here we go. So I got my template all made up. I just used the hammer kind of technique to get these hole locations. So I just stuck this in where I wanted it and then just tapped it lightly with a hammer, and that gave me the emboss on where this should be bolted up at the bottom. And then I just used a drill for this template just to get it somewhat where I wanted it. Then I kind of loosely bolted this cardboard in place so that I could lay in there and see where the best position for the shifter was, height and angle. So I just made it so that these bars kind of lined up with the little shifter arms that are on the transmission. We're going to see if that works out. I have no idea if that's the right way to do that. And then we made it so that it has a couple locations where you can have the shifter for different angles. So I made a straight up and down one, and then if we turn it to this hole, it's pretty aggressively tipped back. We still have an option for drilling a hole in between that just to see where the best angle of this shifter is going to be. I know we can do a bit of that with the other shifter handle that we're going to cut up and make, that we could tweak that. But I just want to get it where I'm comfortable with it, and then that it works the best. So I'm going to get this made up out of this piece of steel. It's like almost a 1/4 inch, I think, so it should be good enough for drilling into it and tapping it, and then it should be sturdy enough to handle this shifter. So let's start cutting and drilling this thing out and see if this is going to work in the car. So let's get after it. So we got that plate all tapped up and all drilled out so it'd fit onto the transmission, and I've just temporarily mocked up the shifter on it. You can see I got it really cheesy taped on there, pretty much just so that when we were kind of trying to shift like through the gears, like faking it, just that I felt comfortable where it was at, and it seems to be pretty good. And I'm trying to make this so that anybody could drive it, so it should be pretty comfortable for anybody. The shifter was actually pretty high when I did the first hole, so you can see that the shifter plate actually hangs really far up, and I've tapped it down lower. I just got some nuts in there to space it out. There's this like little nub that hangs off, and I'm assuming it's like a locking nub, so I'll probably end up making like some type of collar to go around that where this shifter will actually fit into, so that way this could actually never move or rotate, but we'll do that later. It's pretty sturdy as it is right now. I did bolt the seat back in so that I could obviously feel comfortable in here. But now what I think we're going to do is we're going to try to make up some linkage. And I'll probably end up showing you on the bench what we're doing, so you guys got a pretty good idea of how I'm trying to tackle this. So I'm going to climb out of here and meet you guys over at the bench. So we're going to try to make up these shifter rods. And the way my brain is thinking of how to tackle this is that we need to get us something that's going to get us roughly close to where we need to be, and then we can bend up the actual rods. So we're going to be using this leftover aluminum wire that I have. My friend Evan over at Enemy Metalworks actually left us here because he said it was junk, and he said that I will probably use it more than he would, so we are putting it to good use. So we're going to use this to bend up from the shifter to the transmission levers what we want our shifter rods to look like and the rough length of them. So that should work out pretty good. This is a little thin, but it should do the trick. Then what we're going to be using for the rods, so originally I'm pretty sure they would have been pretty close to a 3/8 rod. They were just hooked on one end, and then they had a bushing and then a pin to lock it in on the shifter side, and then they had like an adjustable side that you could thread in and out to actually align it. So we're basically kind of doing the same deal, but instead of making like a pin system, we're going to be using heim joints or rod ends, and we're using a 3/8 rod, and I've bought an assortment of heim joints. So I have this one that I'm thinking that I'm going to use on the transmission side. It already has a bolt like attached to the heim joint, so that should be pretty good. We are going to be putting a jam nut here. And then for the other side, for the shifter side, I just bought like a regular heim joint so that we can do like a through bolt and like a nylon nut or something. And I was kind of eyeballing up, and there should be enough clearance for all that stuff to clear in there with all these heim joints. We're playing it by ear. I have no idea if this is going to work. We might have to make up some custom bolts and like mill them down or something like that, like skim them up with the grinder. But I'm thinking it should work. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to bend this up to get us roughly to the shape. We're going to then bend this up and tap both ends so that these heim joints can fit onto it. And then we'll see if the shifter is actually going to shift it. We're going to start with the reverse one first and then work our way out. So then it'll be second gear, and then first and second, and then third and fourth will be the last one that we do. So I'm gonna bend up the first one, see if it works, and then we'll show you the rest of them. So wish me luck. So we got this shifter linkage all made up, and it does work pretty slick. I'm going to show you here in a second. But I took a little time, obviously, making up each rod, making sure that they had clearance, that they would go past each other, that they would go into the gears fully. Obviously, sitting still, you kind of sometimes have to rock the vehicle back and forth to get it to actually pop into gear. But main thing when you're doing this is to make sure that you take a screwdriver, you put it through your neutral slot so that this is in neutral. You make sure all your arms are in neutral, so that way when you're making up your rods that you have enough adjustment, and making sure that you know, basically that these bolts or whatever you're doing here pop into the shifter perfectly when you just slide it in. There's no force on it. So this is looking pretty slick. It did take a bit of time to function right, but it makes this, right now, it makes the shifter super responsive. I've obviously never done this before, just seen pictures of it online, but we'll roll it through the gears here. Hopefully the camera doesn't fall off the pipe. It's just on a magnet. So you got first, second, third, fourth, and then you can pull it over and up for reverse. It all works really nicely. We're going to cut this off and add a longer shifter on it. For now, this is going to work perfectly fine, just so that we can move the vehicle around. And I can kind of make up the tunnel so I know where the shifter needs to come out. But I think that's going to do it for this video, guys. But we've been making some super great progress on the C1 Chevelle. The videos are taking a little longer to come out than I would like to. But I'm just trying to get everything in this car looking as aesthetically pleasing as possible, and that it functions as best as it can. But the inside of the cockpit here is looking pretty sweet. It's obviously going to look a lot better once we start getting some sheet metal in here. But everything's, you know, the shifter functions awesome. These seats are working great. The e-brake is out of the way, so it should work really good basically for anybody. And I want as many people to drive this car as possible, so that's why I'm really taking my time fitting all this stuff and making it work really well. So, you know, I think that's what it's all about, making it so that people can experience something that they would never be able to experience, and just take people for rides in this thing. So that's super cool. But we are going to have to take a break from the Chevelle just for a little bit, because you guys are getting a sneak peek on what's happening next. We're actually going on Hot Rod Power Tour. As of right now, we're like 30 days away from Power Tour. So we're going to be taking my 1954 Chevy pickup. There's a few videos on the channel of this truck. But I built this thing obviously before YouTube. Actually, I was a teenager when I bought this thing and built it. I've owned it for almost 10 years now. So, you know, we're going to go through this thing with a fine-tooth comb. It is super reliable, and I've really never had any issues with it. But we just want to make sure that we're not going to have any issues when we're down on Power Tour. So I got a whole bunch of parts coming for this thing. We're actually going to be robbing some parts from the Chevelle that I've bought, and we're going to put into the 54. So that's going to be super cool. So definitely stick around for those videos. We're going to have a great time doing that stuff, and you guys will get to learn a little bit of this thing and how my hot rodding kind of started. Actually, I started off with mini trucks, and then I built this thing because I think that's how the chain goes. You get into mini trucks, and then you want something old, so you buy a 50s truck. Basically, I think how it goes. But I think that's going to do it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. We'll catch you next time, and as always, don't forget to salute the beaver.